What does cold milk, Billie Eilish, Prussia, and sketches have in common? Sounds like another episode of Bridgerton. Cheerio, everyone. This is D, Movieman, fellow cinephile, popcorn addicts, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. So today I'm coming to you all with another episode of Bridgerton, Season 1, Episode 3, The Art of the Swoon. Like Episode 2, this episode is also directed by Tom Verica. And now, let us commence. So we open the episode with what appears to be the outdoor ball we saw in the first episode. We see the stage, we see a white cherry blossom tree, and we see various people dancing, including Daphne and Simon. They're having a very intense connection, they're staring into each other's eyes, they're about to kiss, and it is just a dream. Daphne wakes up in the middle of the night, and of course we realize that Daphne is fiending for the Duke. We hit our title credit, then we hear Lady Whistledown informing everyone that Daphne has turned down not one, not two, but 3 proposals this week. Some people might see it as being very mindful of who she wants to marry, but Lady Whistledown suspects that it's because she's waiting on the only suitor of note, the Duke of Hastings. Speaking of which, we enter in on Daphne and the Duke at the tea shop, and Daphne is watching Simon lick a spoon. Like I said, your girl is fiending. Of course, things are going well, but the ruse must continue. Simon reassures her and lets her know that when it comes to the season, he is her trusted general marshaling the troops. Meanwhile, over at the Featherington home, Penelope is waiting for the mail carrier. We also hear Prudence and Philippa discussing a prince that will be arriving in town. And we realize that Penelope is waiting for the mail carrier to see if George has written to Marina. A quick reminder that George is the father of Marina's child, and he is currently away fighting a war in Spain. Marina is pretty frustrated because she hasn't heard anything from him recently, but Penelope reassures her that if your love is true, you don't have anything to worry about. Then Lady Featherington bursts into the room and shoos Penelope out, and she's there to let Marina know that she is going to re-enter society ASAP because they have to find her a husband. The sooner we marry you off to somebody, the sooner we can be done with this whole situation. And then over at the Bridgerton estate, everyone is hanging out in the drawing room. Daphne, of course, is very unsure about who she should marry, and her mother says you just have to marry someone who feels like your dearest friend. Well, easier said than done. I also realized I forgot to mention in the first episode that while the Featherington daughters all have names that start with the letter P, the Bridgerton children all have names that go from A to H. So that's Anthony, Benedict, Colin, Daphne, Eloise, Francesca, Gregory, and Hyacinth. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. I actually thought that was really cool. As always, there's a ball, and we have our regulars in attendance. And once again, as I'm getting to the aesthetics and the vibe of everything, I hear music playing. I hear the string quartet playing music, and I'm like, is that what I think it is? Of course it is. Bad Girl by Billie Eilish. And as I said before, I think the string quartet interpretation of modern songs was a really great idea, and I hope they continue to do that in future seasons. And if anyone is interested in looking that up, the name of the group is the Vitamin String Quartet, so be sure to check them out. So Simon and Daphne meet up, and as they're talking, Lord Weaver comes and approaches her for a dance. And that's when the Duke decides to ramp it up, and he says, "Must I share your attention with every moon-eyed dandy, Miss Bridgerton?" And of course, he says this loud enough for everybody to hear. Daphne is pretty impressed. The jealousy card? Well played. So Daphne is making the rounds. She's having a conversation with Lord Weaver as they're dancing. She asks him questions, but he has no answers for her. And then the second guy can't stop bragging on himself. And the third is telling her how he can't wait to move his mother in with his wife when they get married. So things are not looking up. The Viscountess and Lady Danbury are watching everything play out, and they are genuinely hopeful that Daphne and the Duke will come together. And the irony of all this is that this was all a ruse for everyone to think that they wanted each other, but it seems like they're starting to move in that direction. But then the Duke doesn't want to be married, so how's that gonna pan out? And then we see the Queen make her entrance with this really bomb afro. I was like, come on, creative team. I was loving it. I love that not only are they highlighting the fact that Princess Charlotte was a black woman historically, but they're also highlighting that with the styling, which is really cool. And when I saw the style, I immediately thought of Marie Antoinette, because towards the end of her reign and shortly before the French Revolution, the hairstyles of the time changed, and a style known as the coiffure à l'enfant became very popular. And it was this very teased, poofed up, simpler style, which almost has an afro-ish look to it. Obviously not a real afro, but the style of it was very similar. So I could kind of see where they took that idea and then just said, you know what, let's just go full-blown fro. So I really enjoyed that. So the queen is making her entrance with her nephew, Prince Friedrich of Prussia. And already all the women are on high alert. And Daphne is breaking down to the Duke the physicality of attraction, you know, the lowered eye, sweeping the fan across the bosom and all of those things. And they both find it really hilarious. The Duke says, I bet he's whispering in her ear that her gown is just exquisite. And they're both bonding over how funny it is to both of them. But then Queen Charlotte makes a beeline over to Daphne. She introduces Daphne to her nephew. And then the prince tells Daphne that her gown is exquisite. Well, bad timing there, because the Duke just made a joke about this. And he's standing right behind the prince. So she bursts out laughing and she snorts. And the prince and the queen are like, ugh. Daphne quickly apologizes and the prince tells her no apology is necessary. But the queen is like, maybe a small one. And then she rushes the prince away. Daphne rushes over to the Duke and lets him know that that was all his fault. And he's just wondering how one person can make such a terribly unbecoming sound when laughing. And she can't help but do it again, shortly before she is whisked away to another dance by yet another suitor. Later on, we see the modiste, aka the dressmaker. She's in her shop and she's closed down, but she hears a noise in the back. She grabs some scissors and she's looking around. The shop is closed. The shop is closed. And then she realizes it's Sienna, and that accent goes right out the window. Gosh, see, you have scared me out my wits. And for now, Sienna is staying with the modiste because now that Anthony is out of the picture, she has to find a new gentleman to consort with. They both mention the fact that they're not debutantes and they're not reliant on men, but they've both learned to make their way in the world. And then we see Anthony, Simon, and Lord Featherington at a gentleman's club. They are gambling and having a good time. Anthony and Simon are in a better space, but Anthony is still very wary of the Duke's intentions because he knows he doesn't want to marry. Then we see all these women enter the room to consort with all of these gentlemen. And we see that one of the women is none other than Sienna. She makes a beeline over to the Duke and she outright propositions him while Anthony stares in irritation in the background. So it's late at night, and once again, Daphne is struggling to sleep. She is tossing and turning, and we know why. So she heads downstairs to the kitchen, and she runs into Anthony. She tells him that she's going downstairs for a bit of warm milk and asks if he would like to join her. He's like, sure. Do I need to wake up the servant? She's like, no, we should be fine. And then the next shot we see is them staring at the stove like, so how does this work? I guess we have to light it. How do we do that? Cold milk it is. I mean, that's what happens when you have a staff that can do everything for you. You don't necessarily have to worry about the basics, like lighting a stove. Daphne asks Anthony why the Duke might be opposed to marriage. He says that a lot of the things I know about the Duke would not be for your ears. However, he barely knew his father, he never knew his mother, and he has no siblings. And so he has spent most of his life alone and in isolation. But he says, you know, don't concern yourself with him. You just need to know that some people are not meant to be together, no matter how much you would wish otherwise. And of course, he's referring to Sienna. Lady Whistledown lets everyone know that a new wing is going to be opened in Somerset House and many new pieces are going to be on display. She also lets everyone know that Marina will be making an appearance, having newly recovered from her mysterious illness. And we see the Bridgerton family at Somerset House. They step into this massive room where there are literally paintings covering every inch of the wall. And as soon as I saw that, it immediately reminded me of Harry Potter and how in Hogwarts there are these magical portraits everywhere that interact, that talk to the students and the faculty and the staff. That's immediately what my mind went to. I thought it was really cool how they set that up. So Lady Featherington attempts to introduce Marina to Lord Middlethorpe. He tells Marina that the pleasure is all his. She says, entirely. Penelope drops in and tries to help Marina by pulling her elsewhere, but it's not really working. So finally, Marina just snaps at Lord Middlethorpe and he storms away. Lady Featherington is not happy with either of them. She tells Penelope, you need to stop meddling and you need to realize the gravity of your situation. So then we see Benedict looking at one of the paintings with Lady Danbury, and he's expressing how much he really doesn't like it. Another man walks up and is listening to their conversation, and Benedict is wondering why this piece wasn't skied with some of the other paintings. And to sky a painting is to hang it so high that nobody can see it. So if it's something undesirable, it's usually like far, far away. And then the more desirable pieces would be within view. And Lady Danbury's like, well, we could just ask the artist. And then she turns to the man who's standing next to them. She's like, so why were your pieces not skied? Messy, messy, messy. So Mr. Granville, who is the artist, excuses himself and he leaves. Benedict's like, how could you let me go on like that? She's like, well, how could I not? You have to admit it was funny. Bye. Like I said, Lady Danbury, definitely my favorite. So Daphne is making her way through the house when the prince suddenly approaches her. He lets her know that the art is not the only beautiful thing on display. So he's definitely feeling Daphne. However, Daphne does not feel the same way. Because as he's talking, she catches a glimpse of the Duke in the next room and she quickly excuses herself. I got better places to be. So now the Duke and Daphne are in the same room and they are looking at the art on the opposing walls. Daphne says that she's actually starting to enjoy fooling Lady Whistledown. I bet you are. So she's looking at the opposing wall and then she turns around and now they both are looking at a piece that Simon donated and she notices it's very different from the other ones he included. He mentions that this particular one was a favorite of his mother's, but he's not sure why. And for Daphne, she connects to it immediately. She says it just reminds her of the country, waking up early and looking outside and no one being around, just the serenity and the comfort and the peace of that, the intimacy of it. She totally gets it. And they're both looking at the painting as she says this, but then the moment kind of overtakes them and their hands slowly touch. And of course, there's a genuine connection happening, not just because of the physical attraction, but there's also now this deeper understanding and level of intimacy in that connection between the two. But then they hear a noise in the next room and it kind of snaps them out of the moment. And they see that Lady Cowper has conveniently swooned to the floor. And Daphne and the Duke are once again cracking up because they already know how this goes. And then Simon tells his footman that he will not be attending the opera. So much later on, Sienna realizes that she has been stood up. Lady Whistledown comments on how the prince is making waves in the city, but that one particular diamond seems immune to his charms, which would lead one to question if the crown has lost its luster, which is another shot at the queen, and she is not happy about it. She is really frustrated, she is speaking to her nephew, and she is determined to get him and Daphne together. The prince says, well, according to Lady Whistledown, her heart is already inclined towards the Duke. And the queen is like, I don't care about her heart as long as her hand is free. And we see a brief scene where Daphne and Eloise have another little tete-a-tete. And we just see once again how different their perceptions of life are and why there's such a conflict there. Eloise says, you wish to follow your heart, I wish to nurture my mind. We're not the same. We then see Lady Featherington take Marina to the rough side of town, the hood, so to speak. And she's basically showing her, if we can't marry you off, this is going to be your future. Marina's like, look, I know what you're trying to do, but this is not offensive to me. These are hardworking people just trying to make it through life. What's the big deal? But then Lady Featherington also shows her the children that are begging for money and basically starving. She's like, is this the future you want for your child? And she also asks if George has written back and if she's heard anything from him. And of course, Marina hasn't. And so Lady Featherington just kicks it to her straight. There are a great many men who make declarations of love when they want to make love. But rare is the man whose love remains true when the consequences of his lovemaking are brought to his attention. And I was like, man, I mean, bitter pill to swallow, but unfortunately that's true because we see it so many times in real life. We even saw that with Lord Burbrook on the past episode. So yeah, it looks like Marina is going to have to reconsider her position. So out at the promenade, Simon and Daphne are having another conversation. She's telling Simon how her mother said she should marry someone who's like a dear friend. And so he's like, are you saying I should marry your brother? She's like, no. But she does figure there have to be other things in marriage that bring people together. And he's like, well, yes, there are physical and intangible things in marriage that bring people closer together. But she doesn't understand how something physical and intangible can both work in a marriage. And he's like, it's kind of a touchy subject. It's not something I really want to mention, especially if your mother hasn't told you this already. But she is very insistent, so he's like, Okay. Well, part of it is what happens at night. She's like, at night? When you're sleeping. Not when you're sleeping. She's totally lost. He's like, when you touch yourself. And as he explains, he's basically telling her how to self-stimulate and the benefits of it. And as he's talking, her face is just like, just like her face is like stuck the whole time. She's kind of scared, kind of intimidated, kind of confused, but also kind of intrigued. And it doesn't help that the Duke is the one saying all this. And I am not going to repeat the last thing he says before he walks away. But the way that they did it, when he says that last word and then walks away, I was done. I was just like, oh man. I mean, it was hilarious. Next, we see Lady Danbury smacking the Duke in his knee with her cane. And she basically lets him know, look, if your intentions are genuine with her, then it's business as usual. However, if you are playing games and stringing this girl along, and she misses out on the chance to marry a prince because of you, it's going to be a problem. Later, we see Benedict and Eloise having another late night smoking session. And Eloise is just encouraging Benedict about his sketches. He doesn't feel encouraged. He doesn't feel like he's good at it. And she's like, look, I'm a woman. Lady Whistledown is a woman. Lady Whistledown is a writer, but even she has to write under a false name. She's limited by her gender, and so am I. So if you're going to do something, do it and be bold, because you're a man. You don't have those limitations. She gets up and leaves, and then Benedict comes right out and asks, are you Lady Whistledown? I mean, you're always writing in your diary, and you seem to know a whole lot of people's business. She says, no. But even if I was, do you think I would tell you? I mean, given how outspoken Eloise is, it would definitely be on brand, but I'm pretty sure it's not her. Meanwhile, Daphne is upstairs taking Simon's advice, enjoying herself by herself, if you know what I mean. And it's no surprise that Simon is her inspiration as she's having this moment. So we have crossed the threshold from attraction. We're getting into the passion territory now. So the next time she sees Simon, she's very excited to talk to him about how the ruse is going to go. However, Simon has flipped the script today. We're not going anywhere. We're not going to be seen together anymore. You have a bevy of suitors at your disposal, and the arrangement is over. And Daphne is completely thrown off. She's like, why are you doing this? Look, you have the attention of a prince. He's perfect for you. And before I corrupt you any further, she's like, corrupt me? I'm pretty sure I know the bounds of my own propriety. Besides, I thought you and I were friends. And this is where Simon decides to dig the knife in. He says, we were never friends. You were just a pretty diversion and nothing more. So pretty soon I'll be leaving England and moving on, and I suggest you do the same. And he walks off and he leaves Daphne just reeling. So we know he's doing this for Daphne's sake and because of his conversation with Lady Danbury, but the way he's handling it, it's like, not only are you breaking her heart, you're kind of breaking yours too. We see Sienna at the opera house, and it turns out she has a visitor, none other than Anthony. And Sienna just wants to know what Anthony has to escape this time. What obligation, what responsibility? Because that seems to be the dynamic. I'm your distraction from the outside world. He asks about her and the Duke, and she's like, look, it's not your business, but I'm not with the Duke, I'm not with your friends, and I don't want to deal with you anymore. And I can't believe the only reason you're here is because you're jealous. He tells her, no, I miss you. I want you to come back to me. And she rebuffs him, and she lets him know, look, your position in life is unchanged. You are a Viscount, you will marry, you will sire an heir, and you will safeguard your family. And I will always be the woman you love in the darkness, but never in the light of day. I will not be your fool again. And she leaves him in the dust. But something tells me that's not over just yet. We see Penelope waiting once again for the mail carrier, and success. A letter has arrived from George. She takes it to Marina, but as Marina starts reading it, we see her face fall. George has rescinded his promises to Marina, and he wants nothing more to do with her or his child. But aha, there's treachery afoot. It turns out that Lady Featherington has had her housekeeper duplicate George's handwriting to create a note in which he breaks ties with her. So all of that, not the case at all. I was like, that is cold. I mean, I know why she's doing it, but so foul. And let me take this time real quick to say that I love Polly Walker, the actress who portrays Lady Featherington, and that is because of her role in HBO's Rome. It ran for 2 seasons from 2005 to 2007. And she played the role of Attia, the niece of Julius Caesar. And oh my gosh, that character. I mean, her performance was just like, she was the show. I mean, there were so many characters and so many things happening in that show. It was very brutal, very violent, but her character definitely was one of the highlights of that show. And so to see her all these years later, still at it, still playing a great character on a very popular show, I was so happy. So I just wanted to mention that because I'm definitely a fan. We see Daphne being fitted for a dress by the modiste, and Lady Cowper and her daughter Cressida are there. And Lady Cowper walks over to the Viscountess and lets her know that she's very happy that Daphne is so into the Duke. Because otherwise, Cressida wouldn't have a chance with the prince. I mean, my daughter may have the fortune, but your daughter has the face. I was just like, did you just openly admit that your daughter is not attractive? I was like, well, dang. The Viscountess has another conversation with Anthony, and she gives him a list of 14 single eligible women from very notable families. And she just reminds him that once again, time is of the essence. Then at the latest ball, we see Lady Featherington arrive with her 3 daughters as well as Marina. I loved Marina's look, the yellow and her curls piled up into the updo. Even though I know this is a revisionist fantasy type of show, it's still really great seeing these black hairstyles and black skin and aesthetics within this show. The Duke informs Lady Danbury that he'll be leaving very soon, and she just calls him a fool because she knows what's going down. Daphne makes her entrance. She's wearing her silver and white. Her hair is different. It's curled and she's let it loose in the back. And she is here to put on a show. Everyone stops and they see her standing on the balcony. Cressida is hot. She is not happy to see her at all. The Duke is staring also, but you know, what can he do? And the prince sees her and immediately makes a beeline to her, takes her hand and offers her a dance. As he does that, she accidentally drops her fan. And it's funny because she and Simon were making fun of this earlier in the episode, but now Daphne has decided, oh, okay, this is how we're gonna do this? Time to play the game. And as he seizes, the Duke storms out. And as we close out, we hear Lady Whistledown saying that Daphne has clearly grown tired of waiting on the Duke. But it makes sense. Why have a Duke when you can have a prince? And that closes out episode 3, The Art of the Swoon. So we got some really interesting dynamics going on here. If there was anything, I would say I wish the last part of the episode was done a little differently. I got that it was supposed to be Daphne's big moment, but she looked a lot like she usually does, especially with the white. I mean, I got that her hair was different, but it seemed like her aesthetic was kind of the same. So I wish they would have done like a bolder color or done some kind of interesting updo, you know, just something different. I thought she looked a little too much like herself, even though I got that it was supposed to be a boom moment. It just it didn't quite hit for me that way. But still, overall, I enjoyed the episode. I am enjoying the progression of the story, and I can't wait to see what happens next. So, once again, this is G, Movieman, signing off, and I'll see you at the movies.